All right, folks. Let's start bringing ourselves back together. Have we enjoyed the day? Yes. Was it a good lunch? Yes. Made by the Navy Mess, actually, right here. So, our next event for the afternoon is to take what we talked about this morning in the sort of the theoretical and the macro level and embody resilience in 9 people. Now, how you boil the American Red Cross into 9 people, I'm not quite sure I understand, but somehow we've done that for you all this afternoon. In order to kick that off, I want to introduce to you our host here at the White House for the day, the man who came up with this whole concept of Champions of Change, Deputy Assistant to the President and the Director of Office of Public Engagement, John Carson. John?
Well, good afternoon, everyone. How's your day at the White House been so far? Excellent. So my name's John Carson. I work at the Office of Public Engagement, and I wanted to try to shift the conversation a little bit this afternoon as we bring in our Champions of Change and we start talking about just some of the amazing things that are happening across the country under the leadership of the American Red Cross. And what we do at our office is really think about how do we share good ideas like this? How do we help best practices that are discovered or refined in one part of the country or one part of the world, and how do we share them? And I find it's a fascinating time in just how communication works in our world these days. Theoretically, everything our federal government does, everything our Champions of Change are doing, everything every one of your organizations are doing, theoretically, we could all find it out with one search on Google, right? But yet we kind of feel like nobody knows what's going on. We're in a world where theoretically we're surrounded by information, but I think because of that, we sometimes actually have to push a little harder to help share those good ideas. So the conversation I wanted to start with is, how are you having success doing that? What we're learning at the White House, and a reason we bring people together like this, is that despite putting up your stories online, despite Twitter and Facebook, and we're big fans of all of that, sometimes bringing people together has been a successful way in sharing these best practices and learning. But I would love to open up for questions, either questions you have on how the government approaches these issues, questions for some of our agencies, or really I would love to hear your stories of successes you've had, where an experience you had perhaps in dealing with a disaster, perhaps in working on resiliency, you've been able to connect and learn from other places or share your stories with others. Who'd like to jump in and open up the conversation? Somebody here's got a good story on this front. Well, Paulette, I know you working over at FEMA, connecting volunteers to what's going on. What are some of the interesting ways you've seen this work?
I knew you were going to call on me. I would say one of the things that I've seen when it comes to resilient communities is that generally it's really organic and led by the community. And I think as government, it's really tough for us to figure out how to best promote that. There's always kind of who's in charge and what works. And I would say we saw some really amazing things happen in Joplin, Missouri. Some things that the community really led into themselves, and a lot of what they did was want to take care of the children in their community and make sure that they were getting a space to share their concerns and worry together, and they really led when it came to kids, and that was what their community really cared about. And so I think government and the Red Cross and everyone who's trying to do better when it comes to disasters has to let the community lead, and it's a challenge. Mm-hmm. So always looking for new ways to do that.
One interesting thing we've noticed, and I think some of the Joplin stories are a good example of this, sometimes what people need is not so much that new idea, but more of a permission slip. more of a sense of, oh, I didn't know I could do that. One interesting Champions of Change event we held here last year was with chefs from around the country who had partnered with their local school district to take some of the ideas from the First Lady's Let's Move initiative and help that local school district bring it into their classrooms, bring it into their cafeterias. And what we found afterwards was that a lot of other chefs and other school districts told us by seeing what others had done, they'd just taken the initiative and jumped in and helped make those partnerships. So I think sometimes it's important to tell those stories of how citizens led in Joplin and others, just to let others know that they could do the same. Who else has a good example or question or idea? Yes?
I'll give an example. So in New Orleans, I work with an organization called evacucare.org, and we train about 500 volunteers, mostly young people 18 to 25, who support the citywide evacuation plan. And so in case of a mandatory evacuation, our folks go in, work with the city, with the National Guard, with police and fire, and basically as kind of ambassadors to help the people, the 30,000, 40,000 transit-dependent folks without cars, get to where they need to get out of town. And in partnership with Kay and the Red Cross, it's been a great partnership for us to actually get folks who traditionally don't get into the disaster volunteering, but have time in an event like that because they don't have a house, they don't have a family, and they can spend that 4 days before a hurricane hits helping people get out of town.
So how long have you been working on this in New Orleans?
So the organization's about 3 years old. I've been working on it for about a year.
Okay.
But it started with a guy who was an AmeriCorps volunteer in the mayor's office in New Orleans, who during Hurricane Gustav and Ike realized that there needed to be some sort of grassroots way to get folks because the government, as you were saying, is not as good at certain parts of the volunteering piece, and it's more having another organization to do that is very valuable. And we use a lot of social media tools and other ways to get to that demographic.
So if another community wanted to adopt this approach, what is available? Is there a toolkit? Would they need to contact you? How would they go about that?
One of the things we're actually very interested in doing, and we're trying to kind of get to the stability point with our program in New Orleans, and then we'd like to work with FEMA and others to look at how we take this model to other places. I think Florida would be a good example, Miami. It really requires kind of a notice event as opposed to a no-notice event. It's harder, but you can do it.
Yep.
But there are a lot of communities where we can do that.
Excellent. Other questions or ideas or? Yes.
I'm Jeff McCullough from the University of Minnesota Medical School. I've been involved with the Red Cross for many years. About 25 years ago, it was shown that you could do a bone marrow transplant from an individual unrelated to the patient. When this was first shown, the issue then became, where will we find donors for all these patients who can't get a transplant? We started with 2 Red Cross nurses and began telephoning Red Cross blood donors who said, of course I'll donate bone marrow for someone that I never know and will not likely ever meet, but I may save their lives. Since that time, there are now over 50,000 of these transplants done that started with 2 Red Cross nurses and Red Cross blood donors.
And how have you, tell me a little bit more about how you found those 50,000.
This activity evolved into what's now known as the National Marrow Donor Program. They have over 6 or 8 million donors now in the registry. Started with a few thousand Red Cross blood donors and 2 Red Cross nurses.
That's fascinating. One thing that we've seen is that I think as social media evolved, it was seen as a replacement for some of the traditional methods of volunteer recruitment engagement. What we've learned, and I think a lot of organizations are learning, is that it's an additional tool, but it isn't a replacement at all. I think especially when you're starting something like that, that person-to-person contact, even if it's someone they haven't met before on the phone, in combination with social media is what can be so powerful. That social media makes more people aware of it, so when they receive that phone call, but at the end of the day, you still need to get people together, which I think is such a great piece of what Red Cross does, having local parts, local entities that people can plug into. We've really seen that combined with then the broadcast power of social media, so much more effective than just someone sitting behind a computer tweeting without the connection as well. Other examples or stories or successes or challenges? Yes.
I would say, just to add on to that social media can actually be an entrance to working with certain populations, teenagers in
yeah.
particular, young 20 thing.
Mhm.
And then you can do other kinds of follow-up, but it may actually be the first time they hear about it. And I think there's real power in that.
Oh, that's a good point. Another thing that maybe we could keep the conversation going on and can work with FEMA and others on is, because I know that sometimes that can be a challenge. How do you get connected to a population, to a community that wasn't originally part of your local efforts? If we at the White House sometimes can play a connecting role, we work with lots of different nonprofit organizations that reach out to at-risk youth. Those organizations may be focusing on education, they may be focusing on job skills training, but there's no reason those organizations couldn't be part of bringing the Red Cross connection to them as well. So keep that in mind. And in fact, something I like to remind people, 85% of federal government employees don't work anywhere near Washington, D.C. If you're thinking about who could help me make those connections, if you're in Atlanta, Georgia, every major agency in the federal government has a local office in Atlanta, Georgia, in Los Angeles, in Chicago. There's 10 major federal cities. So when you're looking for those extra connections, take the moment to ask, is there an EPA office here? Is there a HUD office? Is there a USDA office? There is in every single county. So that'd be another way to help make some of those connections. And I think, as you said, as they've heard about it, learned more about it from social media, the connections will go that much faster. Yes?
So you were also talking about challenges, and I think as we continue to work on community resilience and all of the different partnerships that are taking place, we have to make sure that we also have a cultural challenge in our population, which is that you are responsible for your own preparedness. I think it's great that we're building a great infrastructure around them and training and preparedness, but we also have to convince each person that they are responsible for their own preparedness, that they have to start preparing at home with their families, and really not always expect all those additional resources around them. We have to really figure it out one person at a time.
And another great example where Ready.gov and other online assets, the information is certainly there on how, what they need to do to be prepared, even at the community level to be resilient. There's Red Cross chapters they can be a part of. But if we can ever be helpful in making those connections to other organizations that are bringing people together to share that message, we'd love to help do that.
Yeah, and I think that the information is there is how do we change the attitude or the predisposition to be prepared. I think that's something that we still have to tackle in our community.
You know, a lesson we've learned, take an example outside of this. With the Affordable Care Act, if you have a 23-year-old, they can be on your insurance now while they're finding another path. And a lot of people are taking advantage of that. And we've looked very carefully. But the thing is, if you're 23, you just graduated from college, it's not automatic. You have to do something. It's not much, but you have to know that you can be covered and do it. So we've looked closely. Well, how did they find out? How did all those parents, how did all those 22-year-olds find out? And it turns out it's not mostly from op-eds in the New York Times. It's not really from being coverage on CNN about the political ins and outs of the healthcare law. It's one mom talking to another at a basketball game. It's one conversation in the parking lot. And I think sometimes we think that those are the extra things. Those are the, well, that's nice, it got a few more people coverage. That's actually the primary driver of how these connections are made. And I think the conversation about preparedness and resiliency, it's the same thing, the cumulative effect of those conversations. Now, what we also saw was, well, how did the mom at the basketball game know to tell the other moms, and sort of where does the chain start? What we really see is it starts in those local community organizations, many of whom who have been there for a long time. Someone brought it up at a church. Someone brought it up at a YWCA. And Red Cross, I think, is one of those bedrock organizations that we could connect to others to spread that message. Yes?
I think in the state of California, we're doing a lot to partner with schools and work with kids. And we have AmeriCorps members that are going into classroom settings and working with kids. And I think personally, I think it was made an impact to me when we had one of our AmeriCorps members come back and tell us about a student that they were with and said, so what do you do if you were on fire? And the student kind of paused and said, call 911. And I thought, well, that's so interesting because I learned as a kid you stop, drop, and roll.
Right.
But it's so funny to think they
Yeah.
resonate with the kids, with the students. That's really impactful.
Can I ask how many of you in the different work you've done locally have worked with or worked with an organization who had AmeriCorps volunteers? So the majority. That's fantastic. And what I'm so excited about long term, I was a Peace Corps volunteer, not AmeriCorps, but there's just a network there. There's now over 750,000 AmeriCorps alumni who've had experiences like the volunteer that you worked with, who are just going to, I think, form both a network that we can all tap into if you know an AmeriCorps volunteer and want to find out what organizations to work with in another community. It's going to be that network of connections, but I think also those AmeriCorps volunteers are going to be the bedrock of civic participation for groups like Red Cross in the years to come. Other stories or ideas or challenges? Yes?
Richard Flores, Special Advisor for National Tribal Affairs for FEMA. And as you know, there's 566 federally recognized
Yeah.
tribes. And one of the things that you were mentioning about is people, we have to have permission, we have to have
Right.
permission to talk to them, cultural issues. But, and I hear a lot, state and local, but, we need to remember that the state, local, and tribal, they manage, there's sovereign nation, there's self-governance, and we recognize that. Matter of fact, President Obama's administration supported a change to the Stafford Act to allow tribes to make a request, a disaster declaration, emergency disaster declaration directly to the president. And I have to tell you, although I've known about Red Cross forever, even as a disabled veteran coming back, they helped me out. It wasn't until I received a letter from the Red Cross that actually the Red Cross supported the recognition of tribal sovereignty and supported the change to the Stafford Act, which that blew me away because I really never, they're an NGO, so it was pretty impressive. And I sent it out to the tribal leaders, and I got a lot of responses back saying, wow, Red Cross is supporting this. And I know there's a lot of support out there, but again, going back to, the challenges that we have is working directly with the tribal leaders. During the last hurricane we have what's called the Tribal Assistance Coordination Group. A lot of federal agencies are on there. Our tribal representatives, emergency managers get, on the ground information, what you need assistance with. So I'm going to work closely with our Red Cross partners on the tribal side. I know FEMA works with Red Cross, but integrate them or work with them, be partners with them in our tribal assistance coordination group meetings. And again, I was pretty impressed when I got that letter from the Red Cross supporting the Stafford Act. So I look forward to working with everybody. I appreciate inviting me with my new Red Cross partners. So thank you.
Excellent. And have you participated in some of the Tribal Nations conferences we do each December here at the White House?
I was here at November 2011 White House Tribal Conference.
Oh,
And
yeah.
I work with NCAI, I use it, I speak at all the conferences. And the administrator supports and works very closely with the major organizations. And that's why the Tribal Affairs Office, with Special Advisor, works with Craig also, keeps him advised, but working with all the other programs within FEMA. But again, tribal is one of those things is people think state and local and tribes have to go through the state. We need to make sure that we include the tribes, and when we send out messages, we always look at those that say state, local, and tribal, officials or tribal governments, and make sure that they're part of that. So.
Well, and as a matter of fact, what we've found fascinating is the community of 565 different sovereign nations in the tribal community. There really are some successes there in sharing best practices, sharing experiences, having those who've had success working with DOI or HUD or HHS on different initiatives. Have you got a good example or two of how you've seen that information flow?
Sure. One of the things with I'm a retired fire chief for one of the tribes, so one of our things that we work with, we have a lot of working with, sorry, I got so much stuff on my mind here. So working with the EMI, the Emergency Management Institute training, we actually have tribal trainers now that go out and teach the county and state representatives on working with tribes. We actually do, internally, we actually have a 4-hour tribe, because it's not just training the federal government, how to work, we got to train tribal leaders also to understand what emergency management is, why it's important to work together, because, when you need a fire truck, I don't care where it comes from. And so, working with the counties and the states, some have good working relationships, some don't. My job as special advisors, like Craig said, or the administrator said, because I advise everyone on tribal relations, but we work closely with them, with our BIA partners, with our DOI partners, you know, and want to make sure we work real closely with Red Cross. And like I said, I know FEMA works with them, but I'm talking about the tribal program itself and how do we work with them on a daily basis, where in an emergency, pick up the phone. It's a personal relationships within
Right.
the country.
Yeah.
And working with our regional tribal liaisons and our other partners.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. All right. Who else has a good story or comment? Yes.
In my Red Cross career, I've had the opportunity to see preparedness in Chicago and Detroit, and to see the impact that the Red Cross has as an organization to be able to bring those together who don't have a traditional role in disasters,
Mhm.
particularly significant, especially when disasters occur in a community where people have the fewest resources.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just another way to demonstrate the value of our total organization to bring everyone together at a time to make sure that the needs of the community are being met is really significant from my viewpoint as someone that's been a part of the Red Cross movement for 3 years.
And any particular organization, those are some challenging communities I'm sure you've worked in. Any particular techniques or organizations that were helpful in making sure people were connected to the Red Cross?
So, yeah, I can give an example from my time in Chicago. We had a program called Team Fire Stoppers, and where we would target preparedness information for communities where there was a higher occurrence of single-family fires.
Oh, okay.
And because the Red Cross did not have a physical presence in every community where the fires occurred, it was important to build relationships with community organizations that already had a presence, because that was the entryway for us to come in to bring this really important information that would be embraced by the community. And now it leads to hundreds of people every year getting important training on how they can better prepare themselves and their families for a disaster and maybe reduce the risk of what happened.
Well, two stories come to mind. My first personal experience with the Red Cross was as a young person in college who went through a fire, actually in an apartment I lived in. The Red Cross got there before the fire department did. So I'm sure that's not a surprising story to all of you who've seen what you're able to get done. The second thing is that brings to mind in talking about community organizations, we see another interesting phenomenon going on right now. Now, I do think it's important to give everyone permission slips, to be leaders, to take charge in their community, but there's also something else that we're trying to encourage more of. A lot of people do get good ideas, and they think about how they could build an organization, get their community involved, but there seems to be missing a lot of times a moment where everyone stops and says, I wonder if someone else is already doing that. As a returned Peace Corps volunteer, I can tell you every single Peace Corps volunteer on their way back home from their mission country is thinking about the new organization they're going to start to do it right. And the Red Cross knows how to get this done. I'm sure there's so many times when you've seen, I'll give you one example. Here in DC, we work with a lot of groups who reach out to at-risk youth. And we had a meeting of them all once, and there were two different groups who decided that their approach to reaching out to at-risk youth was to teach them computer programming. Well, that's a great idea, but did there really need to be two of them? So we try to do whatever we can as people have energy, excitement, and want to be part of it, where there are organizations like the Red Cross that are already engaged in these programs to try to connect people. And I think it's a message that we have to balance both that supporting entrepreneurialism, supporting people getting engaged, but also supporting those bedrock organizations that are already there. So any way we can ever help with that kind of work as well, we'd be happy to. Other questions? Okay, well, I think at this time, let's go ahead and get to our main event this afternoon. I'd like to welcome up our Champions of Change that we are going to be honoring today. I'm going to read them off, and if you could come in, our first panel can line up here, and the rest we have some reserved seats right in the front. Our first is Dr. Suzanne Horsley from Tuscaloosa, Alabama. Dr. Suzanne. Okay. Thank you, Suzanne. Our next is Kay Wilkins from Louisiana. Kay, come on up. Next is Mahogany Thomas from San Francisco, California. Mary Baslier from North Andover, Massachusetts. Brian Boyle from Welcome, Maryland. Dom Tolley from Wayne, New Jersey. Monica Dawn Owens from Warner Robins, Georgia. And Nan Buzzard from New York City. And finally, Stephanie Phillips from Hilton Head, South Carolina. So before I turn it back over to the team here, I'm actually going to start our Champions of Change program with an ask for all of our champions, an ask for everyone in our audience, and our ask for everyone following along online today. And that's simply to tell your story. The number one thing we've seen in sharing examples, sharing best practices, encouraging more people to be involved, is to give concrete personal examples of people who are making a difference in their community, people who are champions of change. And so whether you're following along online because you're interested in these stories, certainly everyone in the audience has a story to tell, but in particular, our champions of change. I ask you to tweet it out, blog it out, write a letter to the editor in your local newspaper, tell the story of what you do, tell the story of being here at this White House, and tell what got you engaged, what got you involved. Both, I think, to share those ideas, share those best practices that we've been talking about all day long, but also, and most importantly, to inspire others to action as well. So thanks again to our Champions of Change, and thanks for everyone for the great event today. I'll turn it back over.
The first panel can be seated. So thank you, John, very much for your time and for your kind remarks and for facilitating and answering questions. That was a fabulous way to start our Champions Afternoon. It has been a day about stories, and now we're going to have stories from 4 people who are champions. We know from research that people learn from their neighbors. People learn from ordinary folks about what to do. It's much more powerful to hear from my neighbor than it is to hear from the government or the Red Cross. So we'll hear some great stories this afternoon. To interview champions, we had to find a champion. And to moderate this panel, the Assistant Secretary for Preparedness and Response, a member of the uniformed U.S. Public Health Service, Dr. Nikki Lurie.
No, thanks and congratulations to all of our champions of change. And to all of you in the room for being here. What you all do is just really phenomenal. Thought I would just give you just a couple minutes of background about what it is that I do, and then we will hear from each of our panelists. So my office, the Office of the Assistant Secretary for Preparedness Response, was actually started as a lesson learned after Hurricane Katrina, when people decided that all of the elements of preparedness and response needed to come together under one roof. And frankly, to have a place where the buck stops here. So that's me. And in this role, I am the Secretary's principal advisor for all issues related to public health emergency preparedness and response, from bioterrorism to hurricanes and tornadoes, you name it. Sort of we do it, and we bring together all the different parts of HHS, interface with all the different parts of government to do that. We also work on developing medical countermeasures, and we also are the people that do the response, send out the National Disaster Medical System, et cetera, the DMAT teams, when in fact there's a disaster and people need additional medical help. But more importantly, what we try to do is set a vision and policies for the country. And through something called the National Health Security Strategy, we put together a vision that really guides the work that we all do. It's a national strategy, it's not a federal strategy. But one of its two cornerstones really is about building resilient communities. And that's how I've gotten to know and got to know Kay in the past, and that's how I really interface with the Red Cross, Richard Reed, others around this whole mission of resilience. Because resilience is about individuals, it's about families, it's about communities, it's about government, it's about our way of life, and all of those things really interact and interlock in some very powerful ways. So I'm happy to answer questions later about what it is that I do day to day and tell stories if that's what you want, but we're not here today to hear from me, we're here today to hear from our panelists who are really, really remarkable people. And even from reading about them and the things they do, I've learned so much and been so inspired. So I think we'll just jump in. I think that you have all of their bios, is that right? So I'm not going to read that stuff because I'm assuming you can all read and you'd rather hear them talk than have you read. So I'll start with Kay and say, you know, you've been so involved from Hurricane Katrina on up, and most recently with Hurricane Isaac. And I was actually in Louisiana, was so impressed with the progress that has been made since Katrina time. I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about what you've learned from this whole range of experience crossing a whole family of hurricanes or generations of hurricanes that offer lessons on why resilience is so important.
Well, thank you so much for asking that question, because for me, what I've learned these last 7 years is it's the power of connections. And we were being asked to tell stories. So I'm going to tell you some stories about the power of the connections that have affected my life these last 7 years and the lives of many of the people in and around the New Orleans area. The first one, a 12-year-old, throws her arms around a Red Crosser in Houston at the arena. She's one of the first to get out of the city of New Orleans. She throws her arms around this Red Crosser because this Red Crosser had taught her swimming that 3 months before. And she said to the Red Crosser, Miss Laura, I had to swim to get out of my house." And Miss Laura held her and told her she was safe. And then the young girl started crying uncontrollably. And then she said, "But my mama couldn't." Her mother didn't survive. The power of connections. I told this story almost 3 or 4 years later to our new mayor when he was coming into office. And we were talking about hurricanes, but I was talking to him about the need we had to teach the people in and around the city of New Orleans how to swim. And with tears in his eyes, he said, "What do you need? How can I help you?" 2 years later, we have a great swim program in the city of New Orleans. It's a free swimming program, and this past year we trained 8,000 kids. But let me tell you, do you know what we did? For every child who came to us, we gave them a card and asked them to give it to the adult in their life who didn't know how to swim. Because, you know, I never want anyone to tell Miss Laura again that their mother couldn't survive. The power of connections. The power of connections, when you can take a pillowcase, and I can hear a UNO professor talk about the way that pillowcase literally saved the lives of the students who were coming into, as freshmen, into the city of New Orleans, and how they put all of their belongings in a pillowcase and evacuated prior to Katrina. And how today, with corporate sponsors like Disney, we're going to be able to touch 4,000 kids and beyond with pillowcases that become a disaster supply kit for a third grader, that are filled with information for their parents. We do that with our seniors too. We have backpacks that will go on walkers, and we partner with our youth to help our seniors create a communication plan when we need to evacuate. The power of connection. The power of connection that taught me from my friends at Total Community Action, the power of walker-talkers. Going from door to door, knocking on porches and saying, "Do you know what you need to do to be safe? let me talk to you a little bit about this. The power of connections, who today, with our partners at Hope Worldwide and Hands Across New Orleans, who are out there today knocking on 1,250 homes, 3 weeks after Isaac, asking them if they know about what they need to do to be safe. It's the power of connection. I would tell each of you that you're sitting next to someone who has has the ability to make a powerful connection in your life and help you be prepared. Talk to them before today's over. Connect with them and know that for the last 7 years, we've been the recipient of many, many good things in New Orleans. Many of you have taken care of our people in the worst of times. And just want to say, my lesson learned is it's a great place to be when the people of the world turn out and stand on your door and open up their hands and say, what can we do to help? So, thank you.
What a moving story. It hits close to home. I have a son who went to school in Tulane, decided to stay in New Orleans and work, and I am so impressed with the whole community there and the power of connections and the connections that have started and grown out of our horrific event. And hopefully with this last one, it was a bit of a healing event. And that's because of the work that people like you do, Kay. It's just really remarkable. Monica, I would love to hear about the community resilience pilot project that you're working on in Mississippi, focusing on how you built networks and understood what was going on, the risks you saw, and what you wanted to do about it.
So over the course of the past year, I've been working with a team of individuals that are pilot testing a new strategy for the Red Cross to engage whole communities around preparedness and resilience. We have 5 pilot sites. We have folks working from Miami, Florida, all the way over to San Francisco, California, and everywhere in between. Specifically, we're aiming to identify gaps in preparedness and craft solutions that are culturally appropriate to bridge those gaps. And we're encouraging community members to take collective action. And these are local community members that are taking action together to bridge those gaps in preparedness so that the whole community can come together and be resilient when the next event happens. So there's a piece of it that's preparedness, yes, but the real aim is to mitigate any kind of future impact. So fewer lives are lost and less damage to property is done if there's an incident. So that being said, my colleague Lorena Williams and I have been working in South Mississippi with 14 community resilience networks. We have a lot of networks. We had a sense of urgency about this project because we knew we only had 1 year to demonstrate that this strategy could be successful and provide some concrete data up to national headquarters so that moving forward we would have some ideas of how to implement this in the future. So the way we started our work was we started by understanding our community and collecting data. We started by looking at the census data, looking at demographics in our community, really capturing qualitative data as well by by working with EMA directors, key community stakeholders, ministers in communities, informal and formal leaders, to really capture the pulse and the heartbeat of the community, to really understand the needs that are present in the community, and to hear from the community what their concerns are. So we worked with them to capture that data, and it might seem cumbersome at first. It might seem like, why are we doing all this data capturing? What's really the point of this? What's going to come out of this information? But I can tell you 2 things that have come out of it already. We've been able to test against inherent biases about what we thought were our needs in South Mississippi. We were able to talk to our community members and check whether or not what we were concerned about was what the community was concerned about. Because if we just go into a community and try and bulldoze them as Red Crossers and say, this is what you need to do, they might not get on board with us, and they might not want to work with us collaboratively. So we would kind of be defeating ourselves before we even got started. And this data was invaluable during our recent response to Hurricane Isaac. I was leading disaster assessment teams in the field, which is a job I had never done before. It was my first time doing it. They said, Monica, we need you to step in, we need you to do this. But I had that historical data and the knowledge of where our community is impacted most frequently. And I was able to send our damage assessment teams out to go and do verifications and talk with the community members in those areas that were heavily impacted. So speaking about building these networks, we went about it in 2 ways. We went about it by partnering with pre-existing networks like LEPCs, which is a local emergency planning committee. With our Jackson County Local Emergency Planning Committee, we're working on issues like shelter in place with childcare facilities. We have a huge presence of chemical industry in southeast Mississippi, lots of oil refineries in the area. We partner with Chevron there. And we are able to partner with them to leverage some federal dollars to be able to fund preparedness activities and get shelter-in-place kits together to go out and train administrators of school systems and child care facilities on what to do if there's a chemical cloud approaching the school. Many of the schools were thinking that, oh, we need to load up our kids, put them on a bus, drive them away as fast as possible. Well, if you're already seeing the chemical cloud, if you're smelling it, it's already impacting you. And so they need to learn how to shelter in place, and they need to know what action is appropriate. So in addition to that, we've also built networks from the ground up, which is what we've done most frequently. And when we build the networks from the ground up, so to speak, and we're bringing together these groups of people that haven't interacted before together, we're using those key community gatekeepers to leverage them to make the introductions to the folks in the community that are the movers and the shakers, so to speak. So I'm going to ministers in a predominantly African-American community and saying, who are the people in your community that you can see fitting within this strategy? And I'm asking them to make the phone calls and the introductions, because if I call as Monica from the Red Cross, they might not respond the same way as Reverend Bill in Gaston Point neighborhood calls and asks one of the members of his congregation to come out and support the Red Cross initiative. So we are using those key community gatekeepers to make those introductions. Networks, we use the term network. More people in a network doesn't always equal more action. Sometimes it's one-on-one relationships that can leverage this great capacity. For example, I went to my colleague and my partner at Boat People SOS. They're a great community partner of ours in Biloxi, Mississippi, and they work largely with the Vietnamese community, if you're not familiar with them. And I went to Danny Lee at Boat People SOS, and said, Danny, what are you concerned about? And he said, cultural competency training for first responders and community service providers. It was the first thing out of his mouth. It was instant. This is the need in our community. And so we were able to lend our social trust to convene first responders and community service providers in a training that reached over 75 folks. And it came about from one conversation with Danny and a conversation with another community partner at Mississippi Coast Interfaith Disaster Task Force, who was able to provide us with the room and the space to do it. But People SOS had a grant to fly in a subject matter expert from University of Houston in Texas who was able to present to these people. And I learned so much, even by participating in that workshop. So many of us think, oh, all we need to do is we need to produce pamphlets in Vietnamese. And then everybody's automatically going to be prepared, right? No. A lot of folks that are refugees in our country have not been afforded access to education in their home country. So if we're giving a pamphlet in Vietnamese, they might not even be able to read it. That's not accessible information. So we're working with them, and the publicity from that training yielded a new network being developed to bridge cultural barriers between the fire service in Biloxi and service being provided to the Vietnamese community as well as the Hispanic community. So that one conversation yielded a far-reaching impact. So that's just one example.
That's great, and the passion for what you do and for your work is just so palpable. It's terrific. And hearing both of these stories, one of the great things, and things I'll just remind us, is we know so much from research that building these social networks and building connections is not just good for you in an emergency, it's good for you day to day. And the people who are connected to other people and have people they can count on and people who count on them are healthier and live longer. So what you're doing is building networks that help us both in the day-to-day, and it's that strong day-to-day that helps us really in times of trouble and times of emergencies. And we just saw, although southern Mississippi had a ton of flooding and a lot of damage, people really pulled through, people helped each other, communities helped each other. One of my jobs is to make it so communities and states don't need the federal government to come help. And you know what? That was really a success in southern Mississippi. It was terrific.
Yeah.
So Brian, reading your personal emergency story is pretty incredible. Can you tell us about your accident and how it was a turning point in your own life and the goals you set for yourself to enable you to bounce back and be resilient, and how you've then passed that on?
I would say the turning point in my life took place in the summer of 2004. 8 years ago on July 6th, regular summer day, I was driving home from swim practice, and I was involved in a near-fatal car accident with a speeding dump truck. The injuries were catastrophic. My heart was knocked across my chest. All my major organs were damaged, shattered ribs, shattered pelvis, collapsed lungs. Pretty much, I was medevaced out, lost about 60% of my blood, and underwent emergency operations, 14 in total, in a 2-month ordeal where I was in a coma on life support, kidney dialysis, liver damage, resuscitated 8 times on the operating table. And for me, that was my background. And to wake up every day in ICU, pretty much on my deathbed, paralyzed, wondering how I got there, why I'm here, why I can't move, why I can't speak, and see my parents suffer. That was 1,000 times worse for me than what I was going through. I was on morphine. There was no pain, which was a good thing. It was some of that good medicine. And I just kept hopeful. I kept thinking, everything happens for a reason, but why did this happen to me? I was a good kid. I was, did well in school, did sports, went to church, volunteered in my community, and here I am on my deathbed. And I'm not sure what the deal is, but the thing is, the answer that I got was another question. It's, why am I alive? Why am I still here? Why was I saved? And it took some time for me to realize, okay, I have to do something with this story. My experiences, they're very, very adverse, but I have to use them to an advantage to help others going through a similar adverse situation. And for me, that took place when I was, pretty much transferred from PG Hospital, not far from here. I'm from Southern Maryland, so that was my hospital that I spent 2 months in. I was transferred to Kernan in Baltimore for my rehab, and I was there in my wheelchair one day in one of my many therapy sessions. I remember just sitting there thinking to myself, if I can never leave this place, if I can never get better, make that full recovery, I want to help others with my experiences. And going through recovery in ICU, I had so many questions. My parents were able to answer only so many things. So I talked to my medical team, my nurses, my doctors, my physical therapists, and they said, Brian, you received 36 blood transfusions, 13 plasma treatments. And for me, when I heard that, I was so moved. I was thinking, that is the foundation. That's what I want to do. I want to give back, and that's where I want to start. And it was Red Cross blood. That's where the blood came from. And it came from all over the blood region. I've even heard some stories that came from Minnesota. And for me, that made such an impact on my life and my recovery. And I wanted to help others with those experiences. And every day, every improvement, every progress that was made, it was because of my blood donors, my medical team, my parents, my loved ones. It was a support system, as it is in the Red Cross. You heard all today about the structure of the Red Cross, and it's the same in any type of situation, whether it's individual, organizational, in the community. It's all based on a support system. And for me, my own experience, making that full recovery, it took something as extreme as the Hawaii Ironman Triathlon, which is one of the toughest sports events in the world. And that took place, 2007 on October 13th. And after I crossed that finish line, I was given the breath of life all over again. And I lived up to the promise that I made when I was in rehab. And in 2007, in December, I joined forces with the American Red Cross as a volunteer. 2 years later, my first blood donation was at my hospital. That brought me back to life. 5 times since then, I've donated double reds and whole blood. I started working with Greater Chesapeake and Potomac blood region in Baltimore, also with Northeast Division with Dr. O'Neill and Donna, and my team at National with Brian with the NAIA program. Worked with Greg Biffle, the Red Cross Racing, the Tiffany Circle, the high schools, the colleges, there's so many things in the Red Cross, and you see it. And we're all in the Red Cross together, whether volunteer, faculty and staff, leadership, we're all in the same team. We're all in the same fight. It's a fight to save lives. And every day is a great day thanks to what you do. And for me, I'm living because of what you do, so every day is a fantastic day. And ever since, leaving the hospital and making that recovery, it's just been about, showing that gratitude. On behalf of my parents and I, and on behalf of all the blood recipients out there, I received 36 transfusions, 13 plasma treatments, and I'm also a blood donor and a Red Cross National Volunteer spokesperson. So to be here today, it's a phenomenal experience for me to be able to say thank you and hear all these amazing stories, all the panelists this morning, wonderful job, and just to have the ability to just say thank you for what you're doing. Behind all the numbers and the statistics and the financial aspect of it, you guys are saving lives, and I'm one of the many people you've impacted, and you didn't just save me, but you saved my family. Before I get too emotional, I just want to say it's a true honor to be here today with the Champions of Change on behalf of the Red Cross. All these movies that come out, like these Superman movies or Iron Mans or Thors or the Avengers, those are, that's all make-believe. The true superheroes in life are what you guys do. You guys are the true superheroes, guardian angels. And I saw firsthand, and everywhere you go, whether it's disaster, whether it's at a blood drive, you see the impact that the Red Cross makes in all forms, in all communities. You see what is being taken place, and it is just a phenomenal thing. and it really, really does make a difference. On behalf of my family and I, we can't thank you enough. It's an honor to be here, and God bless you all. Thank you.
Wow. Thanks, Brian. Brian, are your parents here?
They're right back there.
Let's recognize them too. Sounds like it was a combination of blood and love that pulled you through. So really, really inspiring. I think it's also a reminder and we all know this, just how fundamental the blood system is and how fragile the blood system is in this country and how important a functioning trauma system is to our national resilience as well. So pretty incredible. Thank you. Mahogany, you're sort of at the other end of this in a lot of different ways in your career as a law enforcement officer. You see all different kinds of emergencies. So tell us a little bit about your trigger point for getting your fellow law enforcement officers to get involved in this effort.
Okay. Hello, everybody. My name's Mahogany Thomas, and I'm a United States probation officer in Los Angeles, California, and I am really nervous right now. I gotta say, especially after going after Brian, I got a chance to meet Brian and hang out with him and his family, and I'm telling you, they are so inspiring, and just their attitudes and their smiles, and they're just a pleasure to be around, and it just reminds me about why we do what we do. So just a little bit about my event. 6 years ago, I learned that every 2 seconds, somebody in the United States needs a blood donation, a blood transfusion. And being in law enforcement for almost 15 years, I am very keenly aware of our competitive nature and how we are when it comes to competition. But I also am very aware of how we are inspired to give back to the communities that we serve and we also live in. So thus the Battle of the Badges blood drive competition was born. And basically what the Battle of the Badges competition is about is a friendly competition between all the different badge carrying agencies in Los Angeles, greater Los Angeles area, Southern California now actually, to see which agency can donate the most blood and therefore save the most lives. So got permission from and the full support of my chief, formed a committee of probation officers and staff, teamed up with the Red Cross, and we just basically pounded the pavement. It was a grassroots movement. We literally went from precinct to precinct, agency to agency, talking to officers about the importance of donating blood. What we didn't count on was that these big, strong guys who carry guns and put themselves in harm's way would be so afraid of a little needle. But heck, even I'm afraid of needles. So, plus, we didn't know what we were doing. We were going by the seat of our pants. We were making stuff up as we went along. But you know what? We were having fun, and we knew why we were doing it. It was the opportunity to save a fellow officer, an accident victim, a sick child. So that's what kept us going. And after 6 short years, I can say that we have collected close to 150,000 pints of life-saving blood for accident victims, which is just amazing, but we're not stopping there. So this is our 7th year. We're looking to take the campaign national. There is no better platform than right here and right now. So if anybody's interested in starting something like that, come talk to me later. So as far as the initial question too as well, I think that when officers are injured in the line of duty, or if there is a local disaster or a colleague gets sick, we rally, our communities rally together And we have these big mainstream drives, and the mayors come out, and the TV crews are there, and that's all wonderful. But as we all know here, the reality is that these efforts need to start before the disaster strike. And so I think that it's just a matter of informing people of that and simply asking the question. Our blood drive is so successful is because we simply ask. Majority of people say they don't donate because they're not asked to donate. So we get to do the asking. And if somebody says no, then we counteroffer, and that just starts the negotiation. So again, thank you. I'm so honored to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. You know, one of the things I always have to keep track of in my job, I have to keep track of all of the national assets there are to help us in a disaster. And I get a daily report on some things and a weekly report on others. And one of the reports I get is about the nation's blood supply and where we have shortages and where we have critical shortages. And, you know, those times when, negative blood is really low or whatever it is, I mean, you really worry, and you sort of grit your, teeth and fingernails through it until we sort of stabilize things out. I never really thought about the idea of making a counteroffer. But I'll have to think about now how to include that in my repertoire. Excellent. So we've heard, I think, what has gotten each of you going and what sort of makes you tick in this. And I suspect if we went around the room, we would have a lot more inspiring stories that I hope you'll have a chance to share with one another during the break. But I know that the Red Cross now is really focused on this whole idea of engaging communities, whole communities to build resilience. And my friend Richard Reed is over here, hired by the Red Cross really to think about and put in place programs to build resilience. What advice would you give Red Cross? And maybe secondarily, what advice would you give me about how to help build resilient communities in our country? Go for it, all of you. Anybody want to start? Rock, paper, scissors?
I would just say, like I just was talking about, don't take no for an answer. Just get your counteroffers ready to go. Be prepared for a no, and be prepared to counteroffer. So I never take a no.
There you go. Is that what you do as a probation officer?
Absolutely. I do have experience.
Yeah. For me, I would say it's important to talk to community partners and potential groups that you might be leveraging in resilience activities and explain to them why you, as a representative of the Red Cross or whatever agency you're with, think it's important for them to be at the table. And on the other side of that, it's important for you to also listen to them and hear what they have to say about what they hope to gain from it or what they're passionate about. Because in all honesty, there's so many times during the first phase of this pilot where we went out and we did these deeper conversations with community stakeholders, and you hear the issues surfacing and you hear trends and what people are talking about. And I know, like in Jackson County, for example, one of our children in emergencies working groups that we have there, the first conversation I had with our EMA director, Donald Langham, he said, I'm concerned about the people right here. And he pointed to a map, and it was a 2-mile radius around our industrial park. I could have gone into that community, and I could have chosen a completely different issue and leveraged other assets and resources. But by joining forces with him, we were able to use him as a force multiplier and to have him go out and really champion that cause in his own community. And it's been great. And it's all about how you can leverage those relationships and build a true partnership.
Great, thanks. Brian, your thoughts?
I would say, just to kind of reinforce this morning's topics about what the Reverend said about building trust, and what Brian said about having the platform where you go into a college community, go to a sports team or a club team, and you have a certain role model kind of influence the rest of the group, through motivation or by leading by example. That's always a key concept, especially bringing the youth into the Red Cross as far as donating blood. And it's just making it cool, making it fun, making it hip, and just getting on their level to make it something where everyone wants to do it. And that's, I think, one of the great programs that Brian's influencing with NAIA.
Great. So making it cool, building trust,
And-
leveraging other people.
Social networking is huge.
Social
Twitter,
networking.
Facebook, you
Uh-huh.
know, just spreading the word and making it, where everyone can be a part of it.
Not taking no for an answer. Kay, do you have anything to add to this list?
Well, I would say, look to the person to your right and left. Katrina taught us that it wasn't just one organization that can help rebuild a community and celebrate the strengths and the resiliency in community. It's each of us working together. I ran out of business cards after Katrina because I always gave business cards and took business cards. And I would encourage you to do that. Celebrate the person next to you. Months went by after Katrina, and every 2 weeks I would sit with a colleague and we would open our books and I would say, with his agency, well, what are you all doing? And we would talk about what Red Cross is doing, and then we would figure out the ways Red Cross could work with that agency. So I really want you to come down to New Orleans. I think Mahogany's a force to be reckoned with herself. So I'm sitting next to her next time.
Absolutely. So you probably know that this session, this panel, is being live streamed, and we are reaching thousands and thousands of people across the country. Unfortunately, I don't think we have the technology here for them to email in or tweet their questions. Hopefully they're tweeting some messages about this event. But this is National Preparedness Month, as we all know. We've talked so much about resilience today. What is your message for people out there who aren't sitting in this room? Go for it.
You know, there are pieces in each of us that make us strong in the worst of times. And what I would say to everyone who's listening, everyone in this room and beyond this room is, we all are going to have high times in our life. We're going to have low times in our lives. When you're in the low times, find that piece of you that makes you strong, that makes you want to put one foot in front of the other and go forward. And then take it to your neighbor. And then take it to your community. And then take it to your city. Because that's what it's all about to me. Resiliency is not one thing or the other. It's a combination of all things. So go out and celebrate resiliency.
Anybody else have a message for out there?
I would just say to step out of your comfort zone and take on a cause and commit to it and remember what you're committed to and really just become unstoppable. I think that, for all of us sitting up here, we took on a cause and we literally became unstoppable. And when you step into that zone, you just begin to live your life. And life just seems to work so much better when it's about others.
So for me, I would say that the message would be that preparedness is important not only during National Preparedness Month, but each and every day of the year. And it's important to take action now to be prepared. A quick little story from one of my networks. I did this MLK Day of Service neighborhood canvassing event where we went out and did door-to-door neighborhood canvassing around fire prevention. So I got all excited when National Headquarters came out with all these ideas about doing this family disaster planning initiative for National Preparedness Month. I'm like, oh, we could do it. We could try and take a canvassing event. We can go door to door in this very disaster vulnerable, low income, predominantly African American neighborhood that is very rarely reached with messaging. And so I took that idea back to my network members who are all representatives of that community, most of them lifelong residents of that community. Some of them are city councilmen in Gulfport and other places like that. We have 2 reverends that serve on that committee as well, just some great folks. And I went to them with that idea. Mind you, this meeting was in July, right after we had had the first conference call. And so I go to them and I'm like, oh, in September we're doing National Preparedness Month, we have all this stuff going on. And they're like, their body language changed completely. They fold their arms, they lean back, they're looking at me, they're like, what's wrong with you? Don't you know that we're vulnerable to disasters right now? And so for me, that showed me that my community that I was working with had become very passionate about the work that we're doing. And they're fully engaged in it. And literally each one of them, all 10 of them took a turn admonishing me for wanting to hoard life-saving information from the community. And they said, why don't you want to do an event here in August? What's wrong with you? Can't you handle the heat? Don't you live down here too? And I was so worried about, a lot of the members were elderly folks, and I was worried about creating another emergency, having a heat-related illness, going out and doing this neighborhood canvassing event. But these folks, I said, okay, I get it. One gentleman that's from Zimbabwe, he said, do you think we wait until National World AIDS Day to educate about HIV prevention and awareness. And so I said, okay, I get it, let's do it now. So we did it on August 4th, and we went door to door in that neighborhood and touched 800 homes, and each of those homes had a family disaster plan. And literally at that meeting, one of my ministers had thrown up his hands and he said, God forbid something happened in August. And guess what? Hurricane Isaac happened in August, and had I not listened to that community network and waited until September to take action, those folks wouldn't have been as prepared. So take action now is my message.
I would say in regards to blood donation and when disaster strikes, it's always good to prepare beforehand. And during the summertime and the holiday months during the winter, there's always a need for blood. The blood supply is always low. We're coming out of a 15-year low right now with the blood supply. And for me, my message is always that 1 hour of your time can help give someone a chance at a lifetime. And that's my main objective, my main passion with the Red Cross is to reinforce that. So.
Thank you. And I would maybe add, especially for all of you who are out there and listening or online or whatever, there's so much about connectedness that happens person to person, day to day, face to face. We all know that there's also a huge amount about connectedness and actions you can take online and connecting with each other online. And you look at how social connections form, and people have all kinds of friendships and relationships and ways that they count on each other, and they've never even met one another. But they've met online, they've made those relationships, they've organized online, they've taken action online. So just because you're not sitting here today, you're not off the hook, okay? You're just as much on the hook as everybody else. And for those of when you leave here, you're on the hook with one another, you're on the hook with people in your media space. I spent a couple of visits lately over at the Red Cross visiting their new digital operations center. It's really interesting to see their use of social media, and I really love this concept of a digital hug. I think it's terrific. Volunteers all over now learning how to give digital hugs and help each other out emotionally through disasters and coach each other through those as well. So there is just so much you can do in your day-to-day life with one another through Red Cross. So Preparedness Month, in some sense, shouldn't be a chore. It should really be a celebration of life and a celebration of energy and celebration of things that you do to make yourselves and your families and your communities and our country stronger every single day. So with that, I'm going to close. I don't know if people have any questions for our panelists before we break. Otherwise, I'll turn this back to the boss.
Dr. Nikki Lurie, our moderator, Kay, Mahogany, Monica, Brian, thank you so much for what you've demonstrated today. And now, it is September and it is National Preparedness Month. Those of us who work in this space for a long time have been concerned that the time people get interested in disaster is when bad things are happening or have happened. And getting people to prepare when something has already happened is a little bit of a challenge. These days, though, we all have something that we didn't have 5 years ago. I'll pull mine out. No, I guess I can't pull mine out. Imagine a smartphone in my hand. And we now have the ability to put preparedness information and response information in people's hands that they will have all the time. Success has many fathers, but one of them, for our ability to put apps on phones, is here to demonstrate what those look like. My colleague, Dom Tolley. Dom?
Thanks. So what we're going to take you through is two PowerPoint demos, the first aid and the hurricane application that we've launched. What's amazing is that combined, those have achieved about 1 million people right now. Actually, over 1 million people now have those apps on their smartphones, and that's people who have it. So we're really thrilled about that and hope it's going to keep growing. So first we'll go through the First Aid app. You'll notice when you first download it is there's a launch screen for emergencies. And this is where the Red Cross gets very serious. If there's an emergency and you need information, the Red Cross will tell you exactly what to do. Hold on, back one, sorry. To do it. And it's going to be very directive and very going forward. Sorry. It has a whole list of what we call everyday first aid emergencies that we believe consumers in their everyday life could face. So this isn't for every emergency, but it's for the most typical ones that we found that are going to occur in people's lives. We want that information on their fingertips. So you'll see the emergency guidance. Again, it's very directive. Put pressure on the wound. If the bleeding is severe, call 911. Keep pressure. Not a lot of flowers, not a lot of, hey, if there's really kind of neat bleeding. It's very directive. There's also something here, and you all know it in the room, but that's the ability to call 911. And what happens is, in an emergency, people tend to get very narrowly focused. They tend to forget things to do. So what we've done is we've integrated the 911 calling button into that emergency commands, such that people, they may be forgetting what to do that. So we feel putting that right there enables them to be able to call 911, or if they forget, to be able to tell somebody to call 911. Because as the pressure mounts, people start to forget things. It's real important to remind them to do that. We also have the ability in the app to learn first aid. This isn't as command mandated, so you can go through it. You can learn, again, for the typical everyday first aid emergencies that you're going to go through, read about each of those type of areas. We have links to other areas. You can go. Videos on it, pictures, diagrams, really trying to make it interactive, really trying to make it interesting, to make it compelling for the people who are taking part in the first aid. This is shocking to me. We have the ability for people to test themselves. So you can view the first aid information. This is the most popular feature of the First Aid app. If you would have told me that we're going to get 750,000 people to test themselves on first aid on their mobile phones, I might not have believed you a year ago. But now I believe it. And what's really great is they're learning it and then they're testing themselves, which means real learning is actually occurring through the app for that. So we'll ask a series of questions. We try to make it fun. We try to make it interactive. Keep going. We make it touch. We try to make it more fun for people to do. That actually you have to slide it. Again, so we make it interactive, make it fun, get people engaged on it. If they don't get the right answer, we'll tell them. Say good luck, and again, we're trying to teach them what's going on. If they do a good job, they get a badge. And that badge can be tweeted, can be put on your Facebook account. And we're finding there's a tremendous amount of sharing of those badges. So the fact that people are learning first aid, the people that we've surrounded that information with a fun test that they can get, and then tweet that out is great, because then we at least know real first aid learning is starting to happen through this device that might not have happened anywhere else. So we're very pleased about that. Okay? Hurricane. So we launched it in June. That Hurricane in August came out. We were about the beginning of the hurricane season. And again, all the people in here, I know, are prepared. But most of the people in the United States will not prepare in advance. So we know that. So mobile is a great vehicle to be able to get that information out to them when they want it. And the Hurricane app came out. A couple of key features. One is obviously the preparedness information. This is preparedness information that the Red Cross has vented through scientists, through years and years of research and millions of dollars in order to get it right. This information is shared through chapters. This information is shared through paper, and now we're very happy to be able to say that this information now being able to share through mobile. What mobile has allowed us to do is to really prioritize what information, what actions we want people to take. You'll notice in the middle screen we have, if you do nothing else, do these 4 steps. That'll get you 60% of the way there. Then do the next 4 steps. That'll get you another 10% of the way there. So you're really helping guide people in those emergency situations with the right actions to take, that are the most urgent actions to take. The next most popular feature we have on there is the ability for people to be alerted. So working with our friends at NOAA, they have an API that we're able to hook into and be able to get weather alerts through it and be able to stream those alerts into the application, a very popular feature. I'll give you an example of what happened during Hurricane Isaac recently that will show you the power of that. For that, we also have the ability for a storm tracker, so if people want to get the alerts of where they are, they can set the alerts for anywhere in the United States or wherever NOAA gives alerts for that, so it can also be some of the islands off the United States. That gives people who maybe not necessarily are in Hurricane Alley the ability to monitor relatives and loved ones that are in it. So we find that's a great way for people to help each other. Say, hey, Mom, you're having a hurricane, you better get out of there. We also have educated testing in the Hurricane app also. So this is what happens, right? So the beginning part, this is when we first launched it. You'll see the big spike happen, right? That's us. That's all the preparedness people downloading it, getting ready for that hurricane coming up. Then you'll see the dip. That's the rest of America. Then Apple features us. We get a bump. And then here's what was starting to happen with Isaac that really put it to the test. As the hurricane was developing, as it was approaching, you could see different areas start to light up with the downloads as it started to approach. So the first warning was, hey, it's going to hit Puerto Rico. Boom, Puerto Rico starts to download the app. It starts to happen a lot. And then, as you can see from the high spike, then when it's starting to hit the Gulf, you could literally see the entire Gulf region just light up, go right from Florida right all the way to Texas, and light right up in order to get that information on their phones. Next. And here's what happened. Here's what's exciting, right? So a day or two before, people are downloading the information. The first thing they're doing is they're going to the preparedness information. We know this because we have data on every single page that happens within the app. And we know they're spending anywhere between 12 to 25 minutes reading this data. This is the first time we've ever had that information, and we know that this information is getting into the minds and getting into the hearts of families. It's fantastic. We also know they're setting up their alerts, so both for their locations and other locations. Now, during Isaac, the weather's coming, the alerts are flying like crazy. We had in Isaac over 2 million weather alerts went out to people of the app. So 2 million hurricane, flood, tornado, and storm warnings and watches went out to people through this app to keep them up to date on what the conditions were both in their areas and in areas that maybe their loved ones were at. They were also obviously using, we have a great partnership with the Weather Channel. We were using some of their data to be able to show the maps. They want to know, so what's going on in my area and is the storm going to hit me? That's what they want to know, so we're able to provide that information again through partnerships. And then after Isaac, the storm is gone. The shelter application becomes the top application used by the app. So people have weathered the storm, now they're looking for help, right? They're looking for help for either food, for shelter, either for themselves or for their family. And you know that this helped people, it helped people survive, and it was terrific. So we're really happy this information got into the hands of people and it made a difference. So we're just thrilled about it. Next up, earthquake. So we're announcing it today, and we're going to be formally launching it next week. It's going to have a lot of the same components that you saw in Hurricane. It's going to have preparedness information, what to do before, during, and after. It's going to have the alerting capability, working with the USGS. We're going to have the earthquake alerts coming into the app. In addition, we're going to have additional data coming in to help people decipher, well, what was the impact of that earthquake in those particular areas for that. Now, what's real important about this is earthquakes don't announce themselves, whereas hurricanes do. So it's real important, and we're working very hard with people on the West Coast and the North and the West to be able to get this on as many people's phones as possible. Because again, earthquakes don't announce; they just happen. And you know, if it's real big, cell towers are down, and we want to get this application as many handsets as possible, such that they have that information when they need it for that time. So that's coming. It's coming to smartphones soon. Make sure you get it. So thank you.
That is fabulous. Dom, thank you so much. We thought about asking Dom to hold the apps for all the apps for today, but then Monica talked to us, and we were worried there'd be some anger. Just kidding, in the South. So now on to panel 2 with more stories about resilience, and I think the panelists should start moving on up. Dom, you're on that group, and you now know a little bit about what Dom is going to talk about and why Dom is a champion of change. And our moderator for the second panel used to work just down the hall and upstairs here in this building as a special assistant to the president for resilience policy. Now my boss, vice president for resilience strategy at the American Red Cross, Richard Reed. Richard.
Awesome. Thank you, Russ. Good afternoon, everybody. Panelists, champions, thank you for joining us. Champions from the first panel. All I can say is truly amazing. And I think hopefully what folks here in the room certainly and folks watching online are beginning to understand and appreciate is that this thing we're calling resilience is something you create. It's something you sustain. It's something you build. And you don't do it by yourself. You do it with the help and support of others, which really gets at the core of the Red Cross. And certainly not just us, but Dr. Lori before in terms of what HHS and the National Disaster Medical System and all of the other components of the federal government, indeed the state and local governments, the territorial and tribal governments, our partners in the philanthropic space, our partners in the private sector, and the other non-governmental organizations, our academic institutions. Everybody has a role to play. And that it reflects well the President's preparedness policy that talks about an all-of-nation approach to ensuring the nation is prepared for the untoward. It talks about creating the capabilities necessary to respond to events. And where you don't have those capabilities inherent to you, your family, your organization, your community, you go find them, you build them, and you sustain them, and you use them, you measure them, you test them, you make sure they work, and if they don't, you refine them. And I think that's what you're hearing here in the panels from this morning, certainly from our champions. I don't think anybody walked into these roles with a keen understanding of exactly where to start and where to end and how they knew they were done, but rather with an attitude and a motivation to work together with others and get things done. So with that, I'm gonna hush. I'm gonna turn to Suzanne and Dr. Horsley and sort of ask you to share not only with our audience, but with others, your experiences, what you've learned, and what you might do differently next time.
Okay, sure. I'm Suzanne Horsley. I wear a couple of hats in this situation here. I'm a public affairs volunteer with the Red Cross in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, but I'm also a professor of public relations at the University of Alabama. So I look at this, what we're doing here with building resiliency from a couple of different directions. Certainly when it comes to trying to build resiliency in my community, working with the Red Cross and working with the partners that we've been hearing about all day, that's a really important part of what I do. But also I'm trying to build resiliency among the next generation of professionals, working through my students in public relations, doing special campaigns for the Red Cross and for other nonprofits in our community, and also just working with my students day to day, trying to help them build some individual resiliency. Those are all things that are important that I hope we can build a bit of a culture among our young people in college so that when they graduate, they're just going to add to the resiliency of whatever community they end up moving into. So that's kind of where I'm coming from today.
Awesome, thank you much. And sort of shift to Dom, and you all have the preview of Dom. He is sort of our version of Steve Jobs. And
Right. No pressure.
I'm sorry. So Dom, and just in terms of the technology as an enabler for really helping communicate the message. And by the way, it is not the only tool in the toolbox.
Correct.
But it is a new and evolving tool that we need to be able to understand and use, appropriately. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yep, so, first I'd like to thank you for having me here. There are literally thousands of people sitting in this chair right now. Through all that we've done by using technology to help the Red Cross fulfill its mission, there are many people that made that possible. Some are here, many are not. So I'd like to thank them and you folks, because it's their efforts and their innovation that made this possible. The mission that we're using for the Red Cross remains the same. It is to get this information into the hands of people and companies such that they can better survive an emergency, be it a medical emergency or be it a weather-related emergency. And we've taken that approach to use technology to get that message out. You've heard a little bit this morning about Ready Rating and how we're using the internet and internet-based tools to allow small companies and schools to get better prepared. The results from that program are fantastic. She mentioned 75% of the companies have taken action. There's some additional data that shows that those companies are not only taking action to keep their companies safe, but they're educating, 70% are educating their employees to be prepared at home. So now those employees are taking that message and becoming prepared at home. So there's a double bang for it going through there. So great results with the Ready Rating. And again, using the technology of the internet and web technology in order to be able to provide that. For consumers, we're taking with 55 to 60% now having smartphones. we're taking that as an opportunity to use that as a way to reach consumers. Again, we used to reach those folks through paper. We still will, and through chapter organizations and through meetings, but now we are able to establish a relationship with them, particularly on mobile technology that enables us to get this information into their hands when they need it, where they need it. Because as we've seen on the Hurricane app, many people are just going to wait to the last possible minute in order to get that data, and mobile enables that to do it. So we're thrilled to be able to provide that, and at the end of each of those is a person or a family that we're impacting. So that's really what drives us, to be able to help that amount of people going forward.
Awesome. Thank you, Dom. And then, of course, with NAN, the challenge here is, while we in America have a variety of cultures, geographically and otherwise, we're pretty homogenous in the sense that we are one nation. And the work that you're doing internationally is similar in some respects, but I think perhaps at another level, more complex. And just want to get your thoughts about, because I think the international space, you guys have done tremendous work about creating this notion of resilience, getting buy-in from our partners, which is not an always easy thing to do, and then actually translating that to actions on the ground. So could you help our folks better understand what you're doing there?
Yes, happily. And first of all, it was a big surprise. I pushed a lot of other people to be in this chair, but I'm the booby prize, but I'm very happy to be here and really thrilled for the honor. The international services part of the American Red Cross is very small, but we think that we punch above our weight. And I think that anyone who's been involved in response, and you've seen it in this country, in floods, in hurricanes, in wildfires, you see that Red Cross emblem. But you've also seen it when you watch the Weather Channel or CNN or anything around the world in every country, whether it's floods, famine, conflict, airline crashes, they're there. So we know that the Red Cross and Red Crescent around the world does phenomenal response work. But anyone who's been involved with response knows that that's not where we're supposed to be most of the time. Where we need to be most of the time is in preparedness. And it's a harder place to be, but it is so critical, not only from a moral point of view, but from an economic efficiency point of view. And in a world of diminishing resources, we need to think very carefully about where we put them. And the international services part of the American Red Cross has pushed very, very hard to take more and more of our funding and our capacity to put towards preparedness. And preparedness is just a small link of resilient communities. And we're very excited because we feel like we, along with our Red Cross partners around the world, are at that sharp end of operationalizing resiliency. We can talk about what it means, we can talk about theory, but what does that mean in a community? And it means there's a whole set of characteristics of a community. And we're supporting those characteristics that are more and more evidence-based. And those characteristics are everything from networking, enabling connection, knowledge and skills, technical information like first aid, which the apps are really great. So we feel like our work is not to ever make communities 100% risk-free. That's impossible. But to make them far, far more resilient. Communities don't look out and see the world in the stovepipes that we do our work in. Communities see health and safety and water and livelihoods and education as a linked set of things. We are the ones who are organized that way. So part of our work is to work with communities and help them and support them in the ways that they understand their resiliency. And that's why we have Pablo throwing Frisbees at us regularly to keep us on our toes. But I think that the most important thing is to say that there is a huge world out there that often doesn't have a 911. Now, maybe it doesn't work all the time here, but you hear how much we're using that. And we need to find ways to continue to support hundreds of thousands, millions of people who live in incredibly vulnerable and precarious situations that deserve our support and have our support, and we want to be there with them. And I think that we'll be able to use technology more and more to do that. But it's really about getting to those vulnerable communities and supporting them around the world, because I think that people expect the American Red Cross in the United States to be there. And we are that. And we can only do it because of the generosity of this extraordinary country in disasters and in preparedness.
Thank you, Nan. Well said. It reminds me of the sort of old, for anybody in the room, spend a little bit of time in, I don't know, Boy Scouts, Cub Scouts, Girl Scouts, Brownies, military. This notion of that the more you sweat in peacetime, the less you bleed in wartime, which really gets at the heart of preparedness from an operational standpoint, if you will, about there are things you can and should be doing. Not all of those, by the way, are easy, convenient, fun, but they are necessary. And so I want to sort of turn to Stephanie and just sort of hear how much she's sweating in peacetime, because I think not only being a student and working in the nursing program and volunteering, there is a lot of activity and effort going into what you do every day. And I just wanted you to have an opportunity to share that with our colleagues.
Okay. Hi, everybody. I'm Stephanie. I am a nursing student at the University of South Carolina. I went into nursing mainly because she's never going to let me live this down, but I'm just like my mother. I enjoy helping people. I don't mind the gross stuff that comes along with nursing. I can handle it, unlike most people. And so I went into it with the idea of helping those who need that and need that support. I started volunteering with the Red Cross in January 2011, mainly because I finally found time for it. I made time because it was something I wanted to do, because in 2004, my mother had 3 open heart surgeries. And it was supposed to be one of those routine open heart surgeries, as routine as you can get with open hearts. However, she developed an infection from the valve that they placed in her, and so she had to go back. And during that second surgery, she had to receive 12 units of blood, which is 10 to 12 units is the entire amount in a human body. And so she was bleeding out. And so it was emergency surgery. They went in. She had told the doctor, I don't know, I've been eating all day. Should I really go in and get this surgery? And he goes, well, if you don't, you'll be dead in the morning. And so they went in and they gave her 12 units of blood just during that one surgery. And it was Red Cross donated blood. And so from that point on, I was 13. And think about how hard it would be on a 13-year-old to lose their mother. And so I knew I always wanted to volunteer for the Red Cross, and finally I did so in college. And it's really important to me, and it's important to me to get the word out about the importance of the Red Cross. They not only touch those who receive blood and those who they help during the disaster, but their families as well. And I've recently been working on trying to get nursing students and nurses alike more involved in the Red Cross. It's very important because one of nurses' main goals is to bridge that gap from healthcare to the common person. Because a lot of times these terms are thrown around in healthcare, and normally you're like, I don't know what that means. And so nurses' primary role is to get those people to understand what is going on in their health care. And it's Red Cross's goal to bridge the gap from those with health care needs to the regular community. And so nurses are the perfect fit. And so my job is, or I've made it to be, to get nursing students and nurses really more involved with the Red Cross. Because who better to go to? Nurses are everywhere in the community. And so they really have the understanding to bridge the gap from those who know nothing about healthcare to those who know everything about healthcare. So I believe that's it.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Stephanie. I greatly appreciate that, and we will circle back to you here shortly with a few other questions about how in the heck do you do all of that stuff. And then, of course, we've got Mary to talk a little bit about the important and wonderful work that the Red Cross does every day on behalf of our service members and their families, covering all branches of service, both work domestically and internationally, in terms of helping families not only during emergencies, but on the, sort of what I call the left of boom and the right of boom activities, those things that happen before and those things that happen after. But Mary, I wanted to see if you could just sort of walk us through sort of what you've learned as you've evolved your thinking on this.
I'm currently the senior station manager down at Fort Hood, Texas. But prior to that, I was the senior station manager at Yokota Air Base in Japan. I was there from 2006 until 2011. And like we heard earlier, 2011 was a boomer year for disasters in the United States. Well, it wasn't only in the United States, it was in Japan too. That's when it came to light. When I went to Yokota, one of the things the wing commander had said is, he said, you know, he goes, we prepare all the time for all kinds of emergencies. We have our airmen prepared. We need help preparing our families. And so we did a briefing. I was observing one of my staff doing a briefing, and they were talking about disaster preparedness. Look out the window, there's, you know, a volcano. We're on a fault line. Japan has the highest number of earthquakes in the world. And one of the ladies says, oh, I'm not going to worry about it. And we're like, why? She says, well, because my husband's in the military and they're going to take care of us. And I'm like, well, when the disaster strikes and your husband has to complete his mission and all the green suiters are running around doing, you know, helping with recovery, and you're sitting there saying, oh my goodness, the bookcase just fell over, what am I going to do with the kids? I said, you need to be prepared for that. I said, you're prepared if he deploys and you need an emergency message, correct? She said, yeah, I have all his information, everything. I said, then be prepared when a disaster strikes. We have floods, we have volcanic eruptions, and the high occurrence of earthquakes. And, you know, it's funny because it came to light on March 11th at 2:45 in 2011. It was a Friday afternoon. Everybody was getting ready to gear down. I was getting ready to pack out to move to Fort Hood. And I was sitting at my desk, and all of a sudden the ground started moving. And my monitor was shaking a little bit. I'm like, oh, another earthquake, no big deal. I've been there 5 years. You know, we have them a couple of times a day. But then it really started shaking. And then you heard glass breaking, things bouncing off the walls. And you heard someone in the building yell, oh my God, it's the big one, hit the floor. And I'm sitting in my office kind of looking around like, oh, it's, you know, another one of those. And it just kept shaking and shaking, and you could hear more things breaking, which was mainly pictures and, you know, your little tokens coming off the walls. Now my computer monitor is going a mile a minute. I'm like, oh crap, this is the big one. It's going to be more. The ground shook for about 5 minutes. It was a 5-6 minute earthquake, 9.0. I said when I was going to Japan, and I used to be an emergency services director, and I used to go out to disaster assignment all the time, and I always told them I will not go for an earthquake in California. And they're like, why? I said, I can deal with the wind, I can deal with the snow, I can deal with the water. The one thing I know is the ground's going to be underneath my feet so I can walk. So I was always afraid of that. And when this one hit, I was nervous. And staff started running around, and all of a sudden the door came flying open. And one of the volunteers had been shopping across the street, and she came running in. Where are they? Where are they? Whipped open the cabinet. I'm like, what are you looking for? She goes, the earthquake brochures. We got to get them out there. We just had an earthquake. Well, then someone else came in behind it. They started grabbing the brochures and the tear sheets, running outside in the parking lot where everybody had gathered from the commissary and the BX where they go shopping, and started handing out brochures. Meanwhile, we're calling for staff accountability to make sure everybody was, you know, all safe, because it hit a good portion of Japan. Us in Misawa, Yokosuka, Kamzama really got a shake going. Well, we accounted for staff, and then we started accounting for our volunteers. We didn't even get a chance to start doing that. Our volunteers started coming in. They just, and all our volunteers, I'd say 90% of them were military families. They're like, you did training. Ironically, the third week in February, we did a week-long disaster institute and taught people how to use the Safe and Well website, how to open and run a shelter, family assistance, you know, overall what we can do and what you can do to help yourselves during a disaster. And one lady comes in, she goes, I got my vest. She had her little blue vest she wears when she volunteers at the hospital. She goes, and I'm ready to go. Where's the shelter? And I looked at her, I goes, well, we haven't gotten to that point yet. Let's assess. I said, but if you could, just start doing a call down on the volunteers. A, see if they're okay, see if their families are okay, and if they're available in case we have to respond to anything, in case the military asks for help. So we're sitting there about an hour later, all of a sudden you hear this booming noise again, and we're like, what is that now? And it got a little worse, and then it went away, and you know, a couple of after tremors. And then someone comes running in, you're not gonna believe this, come out and look. And you saw these commercial flights start landing at Yokota, because they shut down Narita Airport. So we had, I think it was 13 or 14 flights that landed at Yokota, refueled. 2 of them spent the night. So we had about 700 passengers that spent the night on Yokota Air Base, and we had an outpouring. We had 138 volunteers put on vests to go out and help those 634 people, and I think we had 20 crew members. No matter where you looked, it was a sea of Red Cross vests, people helping. We had some of our Japanese volunteers that had been caught in the train station that came over to the base. What can we do to help? So we had them helping with translating, because a lot of the flights were, they were Asian, non-English speaking, so we had some people doing some translating for us. And it was just, and one of the volunteers goes, well, I didn't take the training, what can I do? I said, picture this, it's a big pajama party for a bunch of strangers. Oh, I can handle that, I got kids. And when you look at it, that's basically what it is, right? It's a big pajama party for people you don't know. So we spent the night, the entire night with the military. We were Team Yokota. We were part of the great team that helped these families. And we thought that was it. We knew Japan was affected a lot, but in our little, kingdom right there, that was our situation. And so we spent the night, did karaoke, origami, little cranes, and kept them occupied. And then in the morning, we began processing back onto the buses. One gentleman that was leaving, he said to one of my volunteers, he says, I'm from Alaska. I'm going to Saipan on business. I get grounded in Japan, and I come off the plane, and what do I see? My American Red Cross with their hand out wanting to help. From the time I got off the plane till the time I got back on the plane. And he gave our volunteer a big hug, and she's like, that made me feel so good. She goes, I haven't slept since the night before last, and I felt really, really good. So that was a fantastic, the families just came out. Yeah, the earthquake hit, yeah, they had their houses to clean up, but all they wanted to do was help those who were stranded in Japan with us. We got them back on the buses, and we had a deployed families event that was scheduled. We did events every month for family members of those who were deployed. And we had one scheduled, and everybody's like, oh no, we have to cancel it, we shouldn't be doing it. It was movie in the park, so we had to get trees and get the food ready and everything. And it was only like 4 or 5 hours away. And I said, if you want to cancel it, we can do that. And the volunteers turned around and said, oh no, why should the deployed families suffer and miss their event because of the earthquake? Some of us can do this, the rest of us can keep working and doing what they were doing. So it was a really great opportunity that the volunteers, which are military families, wanted to do that event and keep things as normal as possible as we could for those who were on the base. And it helped, because those families, their spouses weren't there. Their whole family wasn't there. We did send some messages, hey, I'm fine, to where they were in theater, and letting them know, yeah, we're going to movie night at the Red Cross. So it was really, really a great event for them. And then, as time went on, as you know, they evacuated. They offered military families the opportunity to evacuate out of Japan when the nuclear emergency, came to light. And a lot of families went. And we thought we were going to lose a lot of our volunteers. And I turned around when I went to the community center, when they were our base, and there was about, I'd say about 130, 140 blue vests around the community center. I said, are you guys leaving? They're like, no, we're Team Yokota, we're staying, we can help. And so they ended up helping to evacuate, I think it was about 5,000 families over the course of the next few weeks from Japan, the ones who chose to come back during the emergency. And it was a fantastic opportunity. It showed the resiliency of military families. I know they move. I would have a hard time every 3 to 5 years packing up my family, moving, and that's a big upheaval, but then to have a disaster of this magnitude, not only an earthquake, same day a tsunami, and then 2 or 3 days later a nuclear emergency, most people would have run, but the military families stayed, they helped, they were needed, they held their heads proud. A lot of them were spontaneous volunteers, weren't involved with us before, and the first, where's my blue vest? And they put, I need a name tag, so they could be proudly wearing it, and a lot of them became Red Cross volunteers. Some have left Japan since then and have joined at their chapters and military installations that they moved to. So it's something that, we worked with them. It hit, the disaster happened. Some were prepared, some were not. But when all was said and done, a lot of them were prepared. When all was said and done, 433 volunteers had pitched in to give a hand to help over the course of 2 months. It was a fantastic show of community support. We're talking about organizations working together. No one organization can do it alone. Military can't do it alone, but it took all of us working together to meet the needs of those that were affected.
That's awesome. Mary, thank you so much. We talked a little bit about this morning's session about looking at resilience from the individual, the organizational, and the community level, and you've sort of heard, at least from the first panel and certainly this panel, examples of operationalizing that sort of concept at those levels with individuals and with organizations and communities. And I want to sort of follow Nikki Laurie's approach from the first panel and sort of ask our panel members, what advice would you give? Not only other Red Crossers, but certainly others, whether in government or private sector or philanthropic organizations and the like, about ways to think about engaging communities. And asking it this way allows you to sort of think about what have you learned about maybe ways not to do things, right? Because we learn how to do things, but we also theoretically learn how not to do things. I seem to learn that one more and more often than not, but just if you don't mind, Suzette, start with you, and we'll just go down the line and see what your thoughts are.
Sure. Well, I'd like to add to some of the discussion we've had already today about social media and how that can help build resiliency in a community. We've talked a lot about social media. I teach about social media in my classes. But last April, April 27th of 2011, when the tornado, EF4 tornado, destroyed a large part of Tuscaloosa, Alabama, where I live, I personally saw the power of social media. We didn't have power, we didn't have internet, cell phones, landlines, but we had Twitter, we had Facebook, and all those things somehow worked, even though nothing else seemed to be working. Through social media, we were able to, through Red Cross, communicate where our shelters were, communicate where you could get food and water, communicate where you could sleep for the night, how you could help, how you could donate. We relied on social media for so many things. I also was using social media as a spokesperson to communicate with the media. So social media was a critical tool that I was so glad that the Red Cross had already invested in time and energy and training so that we were prepared that day. Some really cool things that came out of that were the fact that we had a lot of ad hoc organizations, groups of grassroots groups of people who wanted to help. They found a niche and were able to supply lots of things to add to the recovery and relief efforts. A lot of these groups, they only existed on social media, and they collected food, they gave out clothes, they did a lot of things that maybe the Red Cross or other responding organizations weren't doing, but they became our partners, and they didn't exist before the tornado struck. But the lesson here is that a lot of those organizations that sort of created these Facebook groups to respond to our tornado kept going. And so during Isaac, Joplin, which came about a month after us, during all these other disasters we've had since then, those groups are still active and they're still doing training, they're still providing resources. So it took a tornado maybe to get that started, but now we have some built-in resiliency and a lot of lessons learned from the Tuscaloosa and the Joplin tornadoes that weren't lost. These lessons are continuing, and I really believe that this investment of time and energy in building your social media networks can really boost the resiliency in your communities. A lot of my students were involved in those efforts at Alabama. They actually were helping me to support the social media efforts. I was able to train a lot of students who are now going to go out and do that wherever they end up, whatever business or organization they end up working for. So I think that's something that our communities, our organizations, and our individuals need to really consider, the power of social media and how we can use that to be more prepared for the next disaster.
That's brilliant. I was reminded as you were talking about the difference between lessons observed, that is those things we notice during events that we see and that our colleagues see and that others see, versus lessons learned, that is what we've done about the things we've seen. There's a difference between observing and learning. Lessons become learned when you do something about them, and I think you're hearing lots of great examples about seeing something and then doing something about it, which is which is a nuance, I get it, but it is a distinction worth making. And the doing part is a little bit harder than the seeing part. So I appreciate that. Dom, so the same question to you, sir.
Sure. So the advice, I guess, is that you kind of have to take a multifaceted approach to it. Excuse me. There's no doubt technology is changing the game. There's no doubt that, you know, those million people reached with the apps are better off today than they were before. But you got to realize there's a lot more people than those millions of people out there. So while technology is certainly changing the game, you have to take a multifaceted approach to be able to hit those people who don't have the smartphones, those people who aren't hooked up to the social networks. And all that comes down to is really understanding who are your various customer segments, such that we knew the initial target, smartphone owners, who have that, have the ability to download the app. There's still 45% that don't have that smartphone. Now we have to dig deeper into, well, who is that customer? Do they even speak English? So by giving them a piece of paper in English, do you help it? The answer is probably not. Well, then we probably need to use more pictures, because we need to get the pictures to defer and imply what actions they need to take. So we're looking at the preparedness as really multifaceted. I mean, the technology is certainly changing the game, but we also got to make sure that other 45% gets addressed. And really understanding what their needs are, make sure that we can develop those solutions. And what's great about the Red Cross is we can use the technology, and we can also implement the 650 chapters we have on the ground and the volunteers we have to help the other 45% going forward.
Thanks, Dom. Nan, what do you got?
Well, very quickly, I will say that while I love preparedness, I know it's not the most exciting thing for everybody. So one of the issues is, how do you keep incentives going? How do you actually get people engaged and continue to be engaged when that's not their daily life? So I think it's partly about this multifaceted piece, which is having the right information for people when they need it. So for farmers in Southern Africa, that could just be about weather information and about markets, which is a form of preparedness. So part of it's about understanding what's the incentive for a population, whether it's their families, whether it's themselves, whether it's their communities. And I think that's the real challenge in how to harness that technology to get to scale. But I do think it's a lot about incentives, because without incentives, I mean, we're all disaster management junkies, but that's not true of a lot of the world. And I think that's really going to be our challenge.
That's an excellent point. As you were talking, I was thinking about, we focus a lot of our time thinking about incentivizing. Another way to think about that is removing the disincentives. This stuff, while it's intuitive, we're not necessarily, sort of set up to do it. And I'll give you the example that I used before about, one of the best preparedness/mitigation tools ever invented by man is the seatbelt. What did it take for most of us to begin wearing it? Right? A law, a threat of a fine, click it or ticket, Lots of reasons for that. Wrinkles your tie, you can't paint your toenails, you can't get in the back seat and play with your kids. I don't know what the reason, but it's illustrative of the problem of preparedness, and that is, while it is intuitive, it's not something you're ready to go home and do right now. And so we take this opportunity and others to do it. But think about the notion of removing disincentives while looking for incentives sort of at the same time. So Stephanie, sort of the same question to you about, what advice would you give folks that sort of want to get involved in working on this thing we're calling resilience?
Well, my advice is kind of give that incentive by giving a story. I guarantee most everyone either has been affected, is related to someone, or at least knows someone who has been affected by the Red Cross. And so if you give that incentive as in, this can save your life, or this can save your mother's life, people are more in tune to what you're actually saying. I know that, if someone I didn't know, a stranger, came up to me and said, I was saved by the Red Cross, they prepared me before the storm. It's like, oh, that's nice, that's great, and I'm very excited for you. However, I would go home and I would kind of think about it, but it wouldn't really impact me. But if my aunt went through a tornado, and I can think about, that saved my aunt's life. And so going out and saying to people that my mother was saved by the Red Cross, people kind of are like, oh, that's nice. But if you say, would you like to save somebody's mother? Would you like to potentially save your own mother? They think about it in a different light. And so you have to go and relate it to the person and relate it to someone that they feel close to. And so just mention it to people. Say, you could be saving one of your aunts, your uncles, your brother, your sister, your mom. And so if you do that, it really relates back. It gives that incentive like, hey, I'm really doing something. I could save one of my family members' lives or my close friends' lives. So.
Stephanie, thank you for that. It's a great example. You know, the literature actually suggests that what motivates people from thinking about doing something to doing about something is this notion of relevance. And while they'll hear the president has a policy and Gail has some thoughts on the issue, but it's when they hear from their neighbors, from their clergy, from people they trust and respect about what they've done in terms of your comment about tell a story, create some relevance. That generally motivates people to do things, or at least gets them closer to doing something than reading it on the back of the magazine cover in the airplane on the way to the next place. So very much appreciate that. And as we all know, and I think, you know, the military community, having been part of that for some part of my life, is another example of a slightly nuanced cultural phenomena, right? I mean, there's a chain of command. There is a way in which things are said and understood and executed. For some, that's great. For others, it's, you know, kind of, I don't want to do that. But with respect to resilience and sort of preparedness activities, I'm sort of interested in Mary's thoughts about within that military structure and command system and family dynamics, you know, what is the advice you'd give folks for sort of making inroads into that?
Don't take no for an answer. Let me tell you, I had a lot of doors shut in my face. Oh, you're a civilian. We have our own policies. I got toughened up. As you can tell, I'm from Boston, born and raised. First time out of Boston, I took an emergency services director job in Jackson, Mississippi. Yes. Having never been out of New England in my life, I get in my little Hyundai and I drive down there. That's when I learned, you know, couldn't get a hotel room. And they're like, well, ma'am, we have NASCAR. And I'm like, I'm fishing derby and a football game. And I'm like, I just looked at him, I said, what's NASCAR? You know, and it was drill weekend as well. And that I knew what that was. But I got a lot of doors shut in my face. And I learned how to open them. You keep talking. Keep explaining what you can do and how you can help them. Military families, like I said, when I got that, no, military's going to take care of us. No, the emergency response personnel, no, we have our policies. I said, but have you thought of this? So every time there was a meeting, I would try to look at the plan and kind of figure out what was missing. That affected families. And the military, as those of you who are in the military know, you can tell a green suited to do anything. Try to tell his kids and his wife to do it. It's not going to go over as well. But that's where we can help. And that's how I approached it. Find other angles to get your information over there. I approached it that great. When's the last time you, and I actually said this to someone, when's the last time you told your wife to go do something? And he looked at me and he goes, it didn't go over well. I said, okay. Multiply that times all the military on the base. He goes, oh, you have a point. I said, we have a way. We can help. We teach families every single day how to be prepared. I said, and we can help you do that. And over time, and it works. And just keep trying, keep getting the information out there. Don't give up, don't quit, and don't take no for an answer.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Mary. And with respect to time and making sure that our folks that had planned to join us are able to do that in the time that they allotted for it, I recognize we're getting close on that. So what I want to do is take a minute now, because we didn't, like panel one did, we can't be exactly like panel one, we're a little bit different, and ask you to join me in congratulating what is clearly a great set of champions.
And one fine moderator. Thank you, Richard.
Yes, my pleasure.
Very much. And remember, don't take no for an answer. I think that's a great way to end the day, Mary. Thank you very much. Thank you to all of our champions, Suzanne, Dom, Nan, Stephanie, Mary, Kay, Brian, Mahogany, Monica. Thank you all. Thank you to our moderators. Thank you to our panelists from this morning. Thank you to our speakers, Secretary Janet Napolitano, Assistant Secretary Paul Stockton, Deputy Assistant to the President John Carson. Thank you all for coming today. This is National Preparedness Month, and while we have endeavored to show the breadth and depth of resilience across the entire Red Cross, being prepared is a critical component. You can't do some of these other things if you are not prepared. A week from today, Red Cross chapters throughout the country will be trying to get people to make a plan. Having lived through disasters with families who had not made a plan versus disasters with families who have made a plan, I can tell you, if there is one thing that makes all the difference, it is that. So next week, or if you want to be like Monica, today, don't wait. Go to redcross.org/prepare to make your family's disaster plan. Thank you, everybody, for coming. Thank you, those of you online who joined us. Thank you to the White House for hosting us.